The alarm clock buzzed at 5 in the morning, and Rosa's hand shot out from under the thin blanket to silence it. She lay there for just a moment, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, listening to the quiet breathing of her two daughters sleeping in the next room. This was her favorite part of the day, these few seconds of stillness before the chaos began. Then she pushed herself up, planted her feet on the cold floor, and got moving. Rosa was 32 years old, and she had been doing this alone for 3 years now. 3 years since her husband Miguel passed away from a sudden heart attack that nobody saw coming. He had been healthy, or so they thought. He was only 35 when he collapsed at work one afternoon and never woke up. The doctors said it was a condition he was born with. Something wrong with his heart that had been waiting his whole life to take him away from her Dot after the funeral. After the crying, after the relatives went back to their own lives, Rosa was left standing in this apartment with two little girls who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. She had to figure out how to pay rent, buy groceries, keep the lights on, and somehow hold herself together when all she wanted to do was fall apart. She found a job at a diner called Lucky's, about 20 minutes away by bus. The pay was not great, but the owner was a kind woman named Betty who understood that Rosa needed flexible hours. Rosa worked the breakfast shift from 6 to 2, then picked up her daughters from school, helped them with homework, made dinner, and put them to bed. On weekends, she picked up extra shifts whenever she could. Sleep became something she squeezed in between everything else. Her daughters were the reason she kept going. Valentina was 11 years old, quiet and serious, with her father's dark eyes and a way of watching the world that made her seem older than she was. She had taken on responsibilities no child should have to carry. She helped her little sister get dressed in the mornings, made sure their backpacks were packed, and never complained when Rosa came home too tired to do anything but collapse on the couch. The younger one, Lucia, was 7. She was the opposite of her sister in many ways. Loud, curious, always asking questions, always wanting to know why the sky was blue or why dogs barked or why Mommy had to work so much. She still had that innocent belief that everything would be okay, that life was basically good. And Rosa fought every day to protect that belief for as long as possible. Their apartment was small but clean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was barely big enough to turn around in, and a living room where they spent most of their time together. The furniture was old, bought secondhand or given to them by neighbors. The walls had cracks that Rosa covered with pictures the girls had drawn at school. It was not much, but Rosa had made it feel like home. She paid her rent on time every single month. This was something she was proud of, something she held on to even when it meant skipping meals or wearing the same worn-out shoes until they fell apart. She knew what it was like to be homeless. When she was a child, her own family had been evicted twice, and she still remembered the shame of carrying garbage bags full of clothes down the street while neighbors watched. She had promised herself that her daughters would never know that feeling. The landlord was a man named Donald Garrett. He was in his 60s, with thin gray hair and small eyes that never seemed to look directly at you. He owned the whole building and 3 others like it in the neighborhood. Rosa had met him only a few times, usually when something broke and she had to ask for repairs. He always seemed annoyed, like her very existence was an inconvenience to him. For the first 2 years, things were fine. Rosa paid her rent, Donald collected it, and they had nothing to say to each other. But about 6 months ago, something changed. The neighborhood was changing too. New coffee shops were opening up, young professionals were moving in, and suddenly the old buildings that used to house working families were being renovated into expensive apartments. Rosa started noticing things. The family on the 4th floor got evicted after a dispute about a lease renewal. The old man on the 2nd floor was told his rent was going up by $300 and had to move out. One by one, the people Rosa knew were disappearing, replaced by strangers who drove nice cars and never said hello in the hallway. She did not think much about it at first. She had too many other things to worry about. But then Donald started coming around more often. He would show up unannounced, claiming he needed to inspect something or check on repairs. He would look around her apartment with those small eyes. And Rosa would feel uncomfortable in a way she could not quite explain. One day about 4 months ago, he knocked on her door and told her that he was raising the rent by $200 starting next month. Rosa felt her stomach drop. She was already stretched thin. $200 might as well have been $2,000. She tried to negotiate. She showed him her payment history, all those months of on-time payments. She explained about her job, about her daughters, about how hard she was working. Donald listened with a blank expression, then shrugged and said that the market was the market. He told her she could either pay the new amount or find somewhere else to live. Rosa did the only thing she could do. She cut back on everything. She stopped buying new clothes for the girls and started shopping at thrift stores. She packed lunches instead of giving them money for the cafeteria. She turned the heat down in winter and wore extra sweaters around the apartment. And somehow, month after month, she scraped together the new rent amount and paid it on time. She always got a receipt. This was something her mother had taught her a long time ago. Never give anyone money without getting proof. So every month, Rosa would hand Donald the cash or money order, and she would wait while he wrote out a receipt. She kept every single one in a shoebox under her bed, organized by date. What Rosa did not know was that Donald had other plans. He wanted her out. Her apartment was one of the larger units in the building, and he knew he could rent it to someone else for twice what Rosa was paying. But she would not leave. She kept paying, kept holding on, and it was making him angry. So he started doing something that Rosa would not discover until it was almost too late. Every month, after she gave him the rent money, he would go back to his office and write a different story in his records. He marked her down as not paying. He created fake notices that he claimed to have sent her. He built a paper trail that showed Rosa as a deadbeat tenant who owed months of back rent, when the truth was exactly the opposite. Rosa had no idea any of this was happening. She was too busy surviving, too busy working double shifts and helping with homework and trying to keep her daughters fed and healthy and happy. She trusted that if she did the right thing, if she paid what she owed and kept her head down, everything would be okay. She was about to find out how wrong she was. That Saturday morning started like any other. Rosa had the day off, which was rare, and she planned to spend it with her girls. Valentina was in the kitchen making pancakes, a skill she had taught herself by watching videos on Rosa's old phone. Lucia was sitting on the couch in her pajamas, watching cartoons and laughing at something silly. Rosa was in the bathroom, brushing her hair and thinking about maybe taking the girls to the park later, when she heard the knocking. It was loud and hard, the kind of knocking that did not sound friendly, the kind that made your heart speed up before you even knew why. She walked to the door, and the knocking came again, even louder this time. Rosa took a breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. 2 police officers stood in the hallway, and the expressions on their faces told her that something was very, very wrong. Rosa stood frozen in the doorway, looking at the 2 officers in front of her. One was older, maybe in his 50s, with a thick mustache and tired eyes. The other was younger, probably not much older than Rosa herself, and he was holding a stack of papers in his hand. The older officer spoke first. His voice was flat, like he had said these words 100 times before and did not really think about them anymore. He told Rosa that they were there to execute an eviction order. He said she had been given multiple notices and had failed to respond. He said she needed to vacate the premises immediately. Rosa felt like the floor had dropped out from under her feet. She heard the words, but they did not make sense. Eviction? Notices? She had not received any notices. She had paid her rent every single month. There had to be a mistake. She tried to explain this to the officers. Her voice came out shaky and higher than normal. She told them she had receipts, proof that she had paid everything. She asked them to wait, just give her a minute to get the papers. But the older officer shook his head. He said the court order was clear. She could contest it later, but right now she had to leave. Behind her, Rosa heard small footsteps. She turned and saw Lucia standing in the hallway, her eyes wide and confused. The little girl was still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep. She looked at the police officers and then at her mother, and her bottom lip started to tremble. "Mommy, what is happening? Why are the police here?" Rosa wanted to go to her daughter, to pick her up and hold her and tell her everything was okay. But before she could move, the younger officer stepped forward. He said they needed to proceed. He said Rosa had to come with them now. Rosa felt a hand on her arm, and suddenly everything became very real. She pulled back instinctively, not hard, just a small movement of resistance. But the older officer took that as a sign of trouble. He grabbed her other arm, and now both of them were holding her, guiding her toward the door. "No, please," Rosa said. Her voice was desperate now. "Please, my children are here. You cannot do this. Let me just get my papers. Let me prove I paid." The officers did not stop. They kept moving her toward the hallway. Rosa looked over her shoulder and saw Valentina come running out of the kitchen. The 11-year-old took one look at what was happening and her face changed. All that quiet maturity disappeared, and she became what she really was, a scared little girl watching strangers take her mother away, Valentina screamed. It was a sound Rosa had never heard from her daughter before, raw and terrified. She ran toward them and grabbed onto Rosa's waist, trying to pull her back. Lucia started crying, loud sobs that echoed through the small apartment. The neighbors began opening their doors. An elderly woman across the hall stepped out and gasped. A young couple 2 doors down stood watching with their mouths open. Everyone was staring, and Rosa felt shame burning through her fear. This was exactly what she had promised herself would never happen. Her daughters were watching their mother being dragged away like a criminal. "Please," Rosa begged again. She was crying now too, tears streaming down her face. "My babies! You cannot take me from my babies. Just let me show you the receipts." "I have proof?" "I swear to God I have proof." The younger officer looked uncomfortable. He glanced at his partner like he was not sure they were doing the right thing. But the older one just kept moving, kept pulling Rosa toward the stairs. He said something about how she could sort it out downtown, how this was not the time or place. Valentina would not let go. She held on to her mother with all her strength, her fingers digging into Rosa's shirt. "Mama, do not leave us," she kept saying. "Mama, please." "Do not let them take you." Lucia had collapsed on the floor just inside the apartment door. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe, her small body shaking with each sob. She kept calling for her mother over and over, her voice getting higher and more panicked. Rosa felt like her heart was being torn out of her chest. She had survived so much. She had buried her husband. She had worked until her body ached. She had gone hungry so her children could eat. But this was something she did not know how to survive. Watching her daughters fall apart while strangers pulled her away from them, the small crowd in the hallway was growing. More neighbors had come out, some still in their robes, all of them watching this nightmare unfold. A few of them were whispering to each other. One woman had her hand over her mouth like she might be sick. An older man was shaking his head slowly, his face full of sadness. Rosa tried one more time. She stopped walking and planted her feet, forcing the officers to stop too. She looked directly at the older one and spoke as clearly as she could through her tears. "Sir, please listen to me. I'm not a bad person. I'm not trying to cheat anyone. I work 2 shifts at a diner to pay my rent. I have never missed a payment in 3 years. Someone is lying to you. Please, I am begging you, just give me 5 minutes to show you the truth, for a moment." Something flickered in the older officer's eyes. Maybe doubt, maybe sympathy, Rosa could not tell. But then he shook his head again. He said he was just doing his job. He said the paperwork was all in order. He said she would have her chance to explain in court. They started moving again, and this time Valentina lost her grip. She fell backward and landed hard on the hallway floor. Rosa cried out her daughter's name and tried to turn back, but the officers held her firm. She could only watch as Valentina sat there on the cold floor, looking up at her mother with an expression of complete devastation. Lucia had crawled to the doorway now. She was reaching out toward Rosa, her little arms stretched as far as they could go. "Mommy," she wailed. "Mommy, come back." Do not go, Rosa thought she might die right there. Not from anything physical, but from the pure pain of this moment. Every instinct in her body was screaming at her to break free, to run back to her children, to protect them. but she could not move. She was trapped between these two officers who saw her as nothing more than a name on a piece of paper. They reached the top of the stairs and Rosa took one last look back. Her daughters were both in the hallway now, holding on to each other. Valentina had her arms wrapped around Lucia, trying to comfort her even though she was crying just as hard. They looked so small, so fragile, so utterly lost. "I love you," Rosa called out to them. Her voice broke on the words. "I love you both. Stay together. I will fix this. I promise I will fix this." She did not know if they heard her. She did not know if she believed her own words. All she knew was that she was being taken away from the only two people in the world who mattered to her, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The officers led her down the stairs, through the lobby, and toward the front door of the building. Rosa could barely see through her tears. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. Her mind was racing, trying to figure out how this had happened, how everything had gone so wrong so fast. And then, just as they reached the lobby, the front door of the building swung open. A man walked in. He was tall, with gray hair and a calm, serious face. He was wearing plain clothes, not a uniform, but something about the way he carried himself made the officers stop in their tracks. The man looked at Rosa, then at the officers, then back at Rosa. He took in her tear-stained face, her shaking body, the way the officers were gripping her arms, and then he spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "What exactly is going on here?" The two officers immediately stiffened when they saw the man who had just walked through the door. Their grip on Rosa loosened slightly, and she felt a tiny flicker of hope spark in her chest. Whoever this man was, he clearly had some kind of authority over them. The older officer spoke first. He straightened his back and addressed the man as chief. He explained that they were executing an eviction order, that the tenant had failed to pay rent for several months, that everything was by the book. The man they called chief did not respond right away. He stood there for a moment, looking at the scene in front of him. His eyes moved from Rosa's tear-streaked face to the officer's hands on her arms, to the small crowd of neighbors who had followed them down to the lobby. Then he looked up toward the staircase, where the faint sound of children crying could still be heard echoing down. His name was Raymond Torres, and he had been the police chief of this district for almost 15 years. He was 61 years old, a widower himself, and he had seen just about everything there was to see in this job. But something about this situation did not sit right with him. He had come to the building this morning to visit his elderly mother, who lived on the 5th floor. He had not expected to walk into this. Chief Torres took a step closer and looked directly at Rosa. His voice was calm but firm when he asked her to tell him what was happening. Rosa could barely get the words out. Her voice was hoarse from crying, and her thoughts were scattered in 1,000 directions. But she forced herself to focus. She told him that she had paid her rent every single month. She told him she had receipts upstairs in her apartment. She told him that someone had made a terrible mistake, or worse, that someone was lying. The chief listened without interrupting. When Rosa finished, he turned to the older officer and asked to see the eviction paperwork. The officer hesitated for just a second, then handed over the stack of documents. Chief Torres flipped through the pages slowly. His expression did not change, but Rosa thought she saw something shift in his eyes. He asked the officers a few questions. When had this order been issued? Had anyone verified the claims with the tenant? Had social services been contacted about the children? The officers exchanged glances. The younger one admitted that they had not contacted social services. The older one said they were just following the order that had come through the system. They had not verified anything because the paperwork seemed complete. Chief Torres closed the folder and looked at both officers for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but carried a weight that made everyone in the lobby pay attention. He said that in his 15 years as chief, he had learned one important thing. Paperwork could lie. People could forge documents. Systems could be manipulated. But the truth always left a trail if you knew where to look. He turned back to Rosa and asked her if she really did have receipts for her rent payments. Rosa nodded quickly. She said they were in a shoebox under her bed, every single one, going back 3 years. The chief made a decision. He told the officers to release Rosa. They started to protest, saying the court order was valid, saying they could get in trouble for not following through. But Chief Torres cut them off. He said he was taking responsibility. He said if anyone had a problem with it, they could take it up with him directly. The officers let go of Rosa's arms. She stumbled slightly, her legs weak from everything that had happened. She wanted to run upstairs to her daughters, but Chief Torres asked her to wait. He said he wanted to see those receipts for himself. They went upstairs together, Rosa, Chief Torres, and the two officers. The neighbors in the hallway parted to let them through, whispering among themselves. When they reached Rosa's apartment, she saw that the door was still open. Valentina and Lucia were inside, huddled together on the couch. When Lucia saw her mother, she let out a cry and ran toward her. Rosa dropped to her knees and caught her daughter in her arms. She held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her hair, feeling the small body shake with leftover sobs. Valentina came over too, and Rosa pulled her into the embrace. For a moment, she just held her girls and let herself feel the relief of being back with them. Chief Torres stood in the doorway, watching the reunion. His face was hard to read, but there was something soft around his eyes. He gave them a minute before gently clearing his throat and reminding Rosa about the receipts. Rosa wiped her face and asked Valentina to stay with her sister. Then she led Chief Torres to her bedroom. She got down on her knees and pulled out the old shoebox from under the bed. Inside were dozens of small papers, each one a receipt for rent payment. Organized by month and year, she handed the box to Chief Torres. He sat down on the edge of her bed and began going through the receipts one by one. Rosa stood nearby, her heart pounding. She knew what was in that box. She knew she had paid. But after everything that had happened this morning, a small part of her was terrified that somehow, impossibly, she was wrong. The chief took his time. He examined each receipt carefully, checking the dates, the amounts, the signatures. Some of them were handwritten by the landlord himself. Others were printed money order receipts with the landlord's name clearly visible as the recipient. After about 10 minutes, Chief Torres looked up at Rosa. His expression had changed. There was anger there now, but it was not directed at her. He told her that according to the eviction paperwork, she had not paid rent for the past 4 months. But the receipts in his hands told a completely different story. Every single month was accounted for. Every payment was documented. Someone had filed a fraudulent eviction order against her. Rosa felt her knees go weak. She had known she was innocent, but hearing it confirmed by this man, by the chief of police, made it real in a way it had not been before. She asked him what this meant. She asked him what would happen now. Chief Torres stood up and handed the shoebox back to her. He told her to keep those receipts safe because she was going to need them. Then he turned to the two officers, who had been standing in the hallway looking increasingly uncomfortable. He told them that this eviction was invalid. He told them that they had almost thrown a mother and her 2 children out on the street based on forged documents. He did not raise his voice, but the disappointment in his tone was clear. He said they should have done their due diligence. They should have asked questions. They should have noticed that something was not right. The younger officer looked down at his feet. The older one tried to defend himself, saying they were just following orders, but Chief Torres cut him off. He said that following orders was not an excuse when innocent people got hurt. He said they were supposed to protect people, not tear families apart without checking the facts first. Then Chief Torres took out his phone and made a call. Rosa listened as he spoke to someone at the police station. He said he needed an investigation opened immediately. He gave the address of the building and the name of the landlord, Donald Garrett. He said there was evidence of fraud and forgery, and he wanted someone on it today. When he hung up, he turned back to Rosa. His expression had softened slightly. He told her that she was not going anywhere. He told her that her apartment was still her home and no one was going to take it from her. He told her that the man who had done this to her was going to face consequences. Rosa did not know what to say. After everything that had happened, after feeling so powerless and so afraid, this stranger had walked in and changed everything. She opened her mouth to thank him, but the words got stuck in her throat. Instead, tears started falling down her face again, but this time they were different. This time they were tears of relief. Chief Torres seemed to understand. He gave her a small nod and told her to take care of her girls. He said someone from the department would be in touch with her soon. Then he turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving Rosa standing there with a shoebox full of receipts and the first real hope she had felt all day. The next few days felt like a dream to Rosa. After Chief Torres left, she locked the door, pulled all the curtains closed, and spent the rest of that Saturday holding her daughters on the couch. They did not go to the park. They did not do anything except stay together, safe inside their small apartment. Trying to recover from what had almost happened, Valentina did not talk much. She just stayed close to her mother, her hand always reaching out to touch Rosa's arm or shoulder, like she needed to make sure she was still there. Lucia was different. She had 100 questions. Why did the police come? Why did they grab Mommy? Who was that man who helped us? Are we going to lose our home? Rosa answered as honestly as she could, trying to explain things in a way a 7-year-old could understand without scaring her even more. On Monday morning, Rosa got a phone call from a detective at the police station. His name was Detective Nunez, and he had been assigned to investigate her case. He asked if she could come down to the station to give a formal statement and bring all her receipts. Rosa said yes. She arranged for a neighbor to watch the girls after school, and that afternoon she took 2 buses across town to the police station. The building was large and gray and intimidating. Rosa had never been inside a police station before, and she felt small and out of place as she walked through the front doors. But Detective Nunez turned out to be kind. He was a middle-aged man with a round face and gentle eyes. He led her to a small room with a table and 2 chairs, offered her coffee, and told her to take her time. Rosa told him everything. She started from the beginning, from when she first moved into the apartment with her husband, to his death, to her struggles to keep up with the bills, to the rent increase, to that terrible Saturday morning. She showed him the shoebox full of receipts. She showed him text messages on her phone where the landlord had confirmed receiving payments. She showed him everything she had. Detective Nunez took notes and photographs of everything. He told Rosa that she had done exactly the right thing by keeping such careful records. He said most people did not do that, and it often made cases like this impossible to prove. But Rosa had proof. Clear, undeniable proof. Then Detective Nunez told her something that made her stomach turn. He said that Rosa was not the only victim. Over the past 2 years, Donald Garrett had successfully evicted at least 3 other tenants from his buildings using the same method. He would collect rent, mark it as unpaid in his records, forge eviction notices, and then file court orders claiming the tenants owed thousands of dollars. Most of them were like Rosa, single mothers, elderly people on fixed incomes, immigrants who did not speak English well, people who did not have lawyers or resources to fight back. Some of them had ended up homeless. One family with 2 young children had been living in their car for 3 months before finding a shelter. An elderly man had lost all his belongings when he was forced out with only a few hours' notice. These were real people whose lives had been destroyed because of one man's greed. Rosa felt sick. She thought about what would have happened if Chief Torres had not walked into that lobby. She would have been arrested. Her daughters would have been taken by child services. They might have ended up separated, put into different foster homes. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, would have been gone in a single morning. But then she thought about those other families. They had not been lucky. No one had walked through the door to save them. They had lost everything, and the man who did it to them had walked away free to do it again. Rosa asked Detective Nunez what was going to happen to Donald Garrett. The detective said they were building a case. They were gathering evidence from all his victims, examining his financial records, comparing his official paperwork with the reality. It would take time, but they were going to make sure he faced justice. A few days later, Rosa saw something on the evening news that made her cry. Donald Garrett had been arrested. The news showed him being led out of his office building in handcuffs, his face red and angry. The reporter said he was being charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and filing false documents. She said the investigation had uncovered a pattern of illegal evictions, targeting vulnerable tenants. Rosa called her mother that night. They talked for almost 2 hours. Her mother cried and thanked God and told Rosa how proud she was of her for never giving up. Rosa cried too. She had been holding so much inside for so long, and finally it felt safe to let some of it out. The news story spread quickly. A local newspaper picked it up and ran a longer article about what Donald Garrett had done. They interviewed some of his other victims, including the family who had lived in their car. The story was heartbreaking, and it made people angry. How could someone do this to innocent families? How could the system let it happen for so long? Then something unexpected happened. The newspaper found out about Rosa's story specifically. They found out about the dramatic scene in the apartment building, about Chief Torres walking in at exactly the right moment, about the shoebox full of receipts that proved everything. They wanted to do a follow-up story, and they wanted to interview Rosa. At first, Rosa said no. She was a private person. She did not want her face on television or her name in the newspaper. She just wanted to go back to her normal life, working at the diner, taking care of her daughters, staying quiet and invisible. But then she thought about those other families again. The ones who had lost everything. The ones who were still out there, maybe facing the same thing right now from other landlords, just like Donald Garrett. If Rosa's story could help even one of them, did she have the right to stay silent? She talked to Valentina about it. Her daughter was only 11, but she had grown up so much in the past few years. Valentina listened carefully and then said something that surprised Rosa. She said that when those officers were taking Mommy away, she had felt completely helpless. She said the worst part was thinking that no one would ever know the truth. If telling their story meant other families would not have to feel that way, then maybe it was worth it. Rosa called the newspaper back and said yes. The interview happened a week later. A reporter came to their apartment with a photographer. Rosa was nervous, but she told her story as honestly as she could. She talked about her husband, about her struggles, about that terrible morning, about Chief Torres. She talked about keeping receipts and not giving up even when everything seemed hopeless. The story ran on the front page of the local section. There was a photo of Rosa with her daughters, all three of them sitting on their old couch in their small living room. The headline called her a hero, but Rosa did not feel like one. She had just done what any mother would do. She had fought for her family. But the story touched something in people. Within days, Rosa started getting messages from strangers. Some of them were facing similar situations and wanted advice. Others just wanted to say they were inspired by her courage. A few local businesses reached out offering help. A furniture store wanted to donate new beds for the girls. A grocery store offered gift cards. A lawyer said he would represent Rosa for free if she decided to sue Donald Garrett. Rosa was overwhelmed. She had spent so long feeling alone, feeling like it was her against the world. She had never imagined that people she had never met would care about her family. It made her realize something important. She was not as alone as she had thought. There were good people out there. Sometimes you just had to go through the darkness before you could see them, and somewhere across town, in a small house on a quiet street, Chief Raymond Torres read the newspaper article and smiled. He had just been in the right place at the right time. But he was glad that this time, being in the right place had made all the difference. 6 months had passed since that terrible Saturday morning, and Rosa's life looked completely different than it had before. Not because she had won the lottery or because some miracle had fallen from the sky. It was different because one moment of injustice had set off a chain of events that nobody could have predicted. Donald Garrett's trial had ended 3 weeks ago. Rosa had sat in the courtroom for most of it, watching as witness after witness came forward to tell their stories. There was the elderly man who had lost his apartment of 20 years. There was the young mother who had spent months in a homeless shelter with her newborn baby. There was the immigrant family who had been too afraid to fight back because they thought no one would believe them. One by one, they stood before the judge and told the truth about what Donald Garrett had done to them. Rosa testified too. She had been nervous walking up to the witness stand, her hands shaking as she took the oath. But once she started talking, the words came easier than she expected. She told the court about her receipts, about that morning, about her daughter screaming in the hallway. She looked directly at Donald Garrett as she spoke, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Fear, the man who had tried to destroy her life was finally afraid. The jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison and ordered him to pay restitution to all his victims. It was not enough to undo what he had done. It could not give back the months of homelessness or the trauma or the lost belongings. But it was something. It was justice. After the trial, Rosa went back to her normal routine. She still worked at the diner, still picked up her daughters from school, still counted every dollar to make sure the bills got paid. But something inside her had shifted. She walked a little taller now. She spoke a little louder. She had faced down a monster and won, and that changed how she saw herself. The community had not forgotten about her either. The donations that had come in after the newspaper article had helped more than Rosa ever expected. The new beds for the girls meant they finally had their own space instead of sharing a mattress. The grocery gift cards meant Rosa could buy fresh vegetables and fruit instead of just the cheapest canned goods. The free legal help meant she did not have to worry about any surprise bills from the court case, but the biggest change came from an unexpected place. Chief Torres had a mother named Gloria who lived on the 5th floor of Rosa's building. That was why he had been there that Saturday morning. He had been coming to visit her, to bring her groceries and check on her health, the way he did every weekend. Gloria was 83 years old, sharp as a tack, and she had been following Rosa's story with great interest. One afternoon, about 2 months after the trial, there was a knock on Rosa's door. She opened it to find Gloria standing there with a plate of homemade cookies and a warm smile. Rosa had seen her around the building before, but had never really talked to her. She invited the older woman inside, made her a cup of tea, and they sat together at the small kitchen table. Gloria did not waste time with small talk. She told Rosa that she had watched her story unfold from the beginning. She had seen the officers dragging her through the hallway. She had seen her son step in to help. She had read the newspaper articles and watched the news coverage. And she had been thinking about Rosa ever since. Then Gloria told Rosa something about herself. Before she retired, she had worked as a nurse for 40 years. She had started as a young woman with nothing, working her way up from cleaning hospital floors to becoming a registered nurse and eventually a nursing supervisor. She knew what it was like to struggle. She knew what it was like to be a woman. Alone in a world that did not make things easy, Gloria also sat on the board of a local nonprofit organization that provided scholarships to single mothers who wanted to go back to school. The organization had been started by a group of retired nurses who wanted to help other women follow in their footsteps. Every year, they gave out a few scholarships to women who showed determination, resilience, and a genuine desire to build a better life for their families. Gloria looked at Rosa across the table and asked her a simple question. Had she ever thought about becoming a nurse? Rosa almost laughed. Of course she had thought about it. When she was younger, before she met her husband, she had dreamed of going to nursing school. She had always wanted to help people, to make a real difference in their lives. But then life happened. She got married, had children, and the dream got pushed further and further away until it seemed impossible. Gloria nodded like she understood completely. Then she told Rosa that the scholarship application deadline was in 2 weeks. She told her that the program covered tuition, books, and even provided some help with childcare. She told her that if Rosa was willing to work hard, this could be her chance to change everything. Rosa did not know what to say. She sat there staring at this woman she barely knew, this stranger who was offering her something she had given up on years ago. It felt too good to be true. Things like this did not happen to people like her, but Gloria just smiled and pushed the plate of cookies toward her. She said that sometimes life knocked you down so hard you thought you would never get up. And sometimes, when you least expected it, a door opened that you never even knew was there. The question was whether you had the courage to walk through it. Rosa thought about everything she had been through. The loss of her husband. The years of exhaustion. The terror of that Saturday morning. She had survived all of it. She had kept going when giving up would have been so much easier. Maybe Gloria was right. Maybe she was stronger than she knew. 2 weeks later, Rosa submitted her scholarship application. She wrote about her life, her struggles, her daughters, and her dreams. She wrote about what it felt like to be dragged away from her children and what it felt like to be saved by a stranger. She wrote about the shoebox full of receipts and what it had taught her about fighting for herself. 1 month after that, she got a letter in the mail. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Valentina and Lucia stood beside her. Watching with wide eyes, Rosa read the first line and burst into tears. She had been accepted. Full scholarship. Starting in the fall, that night Rosa made a special dinner. Nothing fancy, just the girls' favorite foods, but she set the table nicely and lit a candle in the center. They held hands and Rosa said a prayer of thanks. She thanked God for her daughters. She thanked God for Chief Torres and his mother Gloria. She thanked God for the shoebox under her bed that had saved their lives. Then she looked at her girls and told them something. She wanted them to remember forever. She said that life was not fair. Bad things happen to good people. Sometimes it felt like the whole world was against you and there was no way out. But you could not give up. You had to keep fighting, keep believing, keep putting one foot in front of the other. Because you never knew when everything was about to change. You never knew when someone was about to walk through that door and turn your whole life around. Valentina smiled and said she was proud of her mother. Lucia clapped her hands and said Mommy was going to be a nurse. And Rosa sat there at her kitchen table, surrounded by the two people she loved most in the world, finally allowing herself to believe that the future might be brighter than the past. 1 year later, Rosa started nursing school. 2 years after that, she graduated at the top of her class. Her daughters were in the front row, cheering louder than anyone, and sometimes, on quiet nights, Rosa would take out that old shoebox and look at those faded receipts. They reminded her of where she had been and how far she had come. They reminded her that the truth always matters, that keeping records can save your life, and that sometimes the people who help you most are the ones you never expected. She kept that shoebox forever. It was more than just paper. It was proof that she had survived.